Love on Fifth Avenue by Asia Monique. Introduction. This story is sweet and short. There is no middle or end, only the beginning of a beautiful love story. Enjoy. Dedication. This is an ode to Lily Francine Fredericks. You finally got your wings, butterfly. Chapter 1. Luna. I was running late. For the third time this week, I overslept. My grandmother hadn't lied. New York City never slept. I was a Southern girl with deep Southern roots. Growing up in Little Rock, Arkansas, I was used to a slow and steady lifestyle. The speed of the city had been an adjustment. But after 8 years of living in Manhattan, I'd been able to find my footing. This week, my usual peaceful nights were disturbed by a constant restlessness. Shaking my head, I focused on my destination. Just ahead of me was my place of employment for the last 4 years. Macy's hadn't been my first choice, but in the end, it had been the best choice. After 4 years at the Fashion Institute of Technology, I gained my fashion wings. It was hard trying to break into the industry, but I'd done it. I landed my dream job as a fashion buyer. Out of 50 applicants, they'd chosen the dark-skinned country girl with a heavy accent, and 4 years later, I was still here. My grandmother would be proud. Shit! I cursed, stumbling in my 5-inch heels into a pair of strong arms. The crowded Fifth Avenue didn't stop moving because of my mishap, but I was grateful for the only decent man the city seemed to have for catching me. I'm sorry. I took a deep breath and tried centering myself. It's all right, beautiful, he murmured. Shocked by how deep and smooth his voice was, my eyes shot open to get a look at his face. My God. You should probably wear sneakers out here and then change at your destination. I couldn't look away from his smiling eyes. You might be right, I whispered and licked my lips. His eyes, they were almost the color of chestnuts. I'd never seen anything like it before, not on a man whose skin matched my own. His ebony hue glowed. I cleared my throat and backed away. His touch had me tongue-tied. His heavy New York accent had me feeling like a dog in heat. I needed to get a grip, and quick. It wasn't until there was some space between us that his height and bulky frame became clear. Standing at what had to be 6'6", this man was beautiful, and the suit he wore only made him sexier. I should get going. Thank you for not letting me fall, I whispered again, awe evident in my voice. My pleasure. Luna, I cleared my throat and announced. His smile stretched further across his face, and my knees weakened. What was this man doing to me? My pleasure, Luna. I nodded and quickly turned on my heels. My mind screamed for me to turn around and get his name, but I kept walking until I was inside Macy's storefront and my office with the door closed. It wasn't typical for fashion buyers to work out of a storefront, but I wanted a set office space, and they obliged my request. "Breathe, girl," I coached. "Breathe." Knock, knock. My office door pushed open, and Jenny, the store's district manager, waltzed in looking as prim and proper as always. "Hey, girl, I thought I missed you." I fought not to roll my eyes. "And why would you have missed me?" I only set foot in the office 2, maybe 3 times a week if I wasn't traveling, and Jenny was present each day. Her baby blue orbs found mine, and she studied me. Jenny was the typical blonde-hair, blue-eyed city girl who came from money. And for some reason, she had attached herself to me over the last year. Maybe she wanted to figure out why I had the position she desperately wanted, or maybe she was simply intrigued by me. Truthfully, I didn't care. For the most part, I allowed her to believe we were work friends, but today, I wasn't in the mood. "You've been off your game since Monday. Is there something going on in your life?" I snorted and pulled my MacBook from my bag. "Jenny, I have a lot of work to handle. Can we pick this up another day?" "Oh," she rubbed her hands together. "Sure, yeah." I nodded and watched as she moved back toward the door. Her perfect blonde curls bounced and swayed with her walk. She paused and glanced back at me. "But if you ever need a listening ear, I'm here." She was gone before I could respond. She'd actually sounded genuine, and I almost felt bad. Maybe Jenny just wanted a friend after all. Shaking away my thoughts, I got to work. For the past month, I'd been corresponding with a designer who had been on Project Runway. Although she hadn't been the winner, she was a better designer in my opinion. Let's just say I was pressed to get some exclusive pieces from her into our stores. Today, I was finalizing the details of her contract with us. In the coming weeks, production would begin for her line. The fact that she was a talented Black woman was a bonus. After 4 hours of working nonstop on my laptop, I left my office with my mind solely on food. I was almost to the exit when I heard his voice. 2 times in one day. It had to be fate. My body's first reaction was to run, but my legs had another idea. I turned around, and there he was, talking to Jenny. Her wide eyes found mine, and then she pointed. My morning savior glanced over his shoulder and smiled. Shit. He has to stop doing that. Luna, this man says you dropped your wallet this morning and he wanted to return it to you." Jenny's words were a jumbled mess, but I understood her enough to make out what she was trying to say. "Thanks, Jenny," I said and nodded, signaling for her to leave. She was seconds away from drooling. I had to save her from the embarrassment. No problem." She rushed off, leaving me to face the man I'd rushed away from just a few hours prior. "Is she all right?" I chuckled, finding a little confidence. "Have you seen yourself? She's just trying to process what she witnessed here today. She won't ever be the same again, but she'll be all right." His deep laughter sent chills spiraling throughout my body. What shocked me the most was the way I wanted to marinate in those chills. A sense of humor to match the beauty and the accent, he muttered. I like. There was something about the way he stared at me. Something that made me want to know exactly who this man was and what he was about. I was just heading to lunch, I said, waving at the Macy's exit. Care to join me? He lifted my matte black wallet and said, I'm glad I caught you before you left. I nodded and took it from his large hands. I was hoping to ask you the same thing. So yes, let's do lunch. As we walked down Fifth Avenue toward BH Kitchen and Bar, I stole glances at the man whose name I realized I didn't know. What's your name? I asked. Derek Cole. He replied without hesitation. His chestnut gaze gave me a once-over, and then he focused on getting us through the crowded street. I hadn't missed how he smoothly maneuvered my body to his right, keeping me away from the oncoming traffic. If nothing else, he was a gentleman. Someone had raised him right, and at that moment, my grandmother's words came to mind. A man that stands in the way of danger for you is a keeper, Lulu. She was a wise woman and had left this earth sooner than I was ready for. The selfish part of me wanted to blame God, but I knew she would be disappointed in those thoughts, so I never let them take up residence in my mind. Instead, I lived off the things she'd taught me about life and love. I glanced at Derek again as he pulled the door open to our restaurant of choice. Who are you, Derek Cole? More importantly, what do you stand for? How did you find out where I worked? I saw you walk into Macy's before I entered my building across the street, he said, sliding his glass of water in front of himself. I called out to you, but I think you were more focused on trying to get away from me. His eyes lit up with amusement. I guess I hadn't been too discreet with that, huh? I laughed. Nah, but it's all good. He stared into my eyes. It gave me another chance to see you again. How many times a week do you run into women on the street, Mr. Cole? Not as often as you'd think with how busy it gets out there. And please, call me Derek. Mr. Cole is my father. Before I had the chance to respond, our waiter came over and set our meals in front of us, then sauntered off. I stared down at my mushroom and Swiss burger, suddenly hungrier than I was before we walked in. Wasting no time, I popped a fry into my mouth, picked up my burger, and took a huge bite. Oh, my. I closed my eyes and sighed. That good, huh? Shit. I slowly opened my eyes and smiled bashfully. Hey, I come from the South and we love to eat. No judgment here. He cut into his chicken breast and stuffed a piece into his mouth. I watched him in awe. Who knew that watching someone eat could be a turn-on? I twisted slightly in my seat to ease the ache between my legs. I love a woman who isn't afraid to eat. Derek would learn soon that I wasn't afraid of much. You said you work in the building across from Macy's? He nodded. Cole Investments, right? Another nod, but no actual words. Was there something? Wait, your last name is Cole. I was named after my father. You own... Not yet, I don't. I'm a senior-level executive who will someday own Cole Investments, but I want to earn my spot at the top. His voice had an edge to it that was hard to ignore, but I didn't want to dig that deep, not when we'd just met. "Where did you go to school?" I asked and picked up a fry. "Cornell. What about you?" "Fashion Institute." I shrugged. What was that shrug about? "It isn't Cornell." "But it's something, and my sister is praying she gets in." I smiled at the idea of him having a fashionista as a sister. We could be a pain in the ass sometimes. My two brothers could attest to that. As a matter of fact, she picked out this suit for me. Today was a big day. I didn't need to look him over again to know she'd done an amazing job picking out the Armani suit that fit him perfectly. "What made today big?" "I signed my biggest client today." A burst of excitement flowed through me. Why did his accomplishment feel like one of my own? Maybe it was the way his eyes lit up, or maybe it was the determined glint I saw behind that light. I saw my own drive in him, and that happened to be the sexiest thing about him so far. "It sounds like we need to have a celebratory drink then." "Don't you have to get back to work soon?" I shook my head and pushed my plate away. I make my own schedule for the most part. And as of, I glanced at my watch, 2:15, I am off the clock. "In that case, I have better liquor in my office than they can offer us here." He pulled a few 20s from his wallet, tossed them on the table, and stood. "What do you say?" Following this man into unknown territory could be dangerous, but today I felt a little mischievous. "Show me the way," I instructed, standing and looping my arm through his. Chapter 2. Derek. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, son. My father's words didn't make sense anymore. There was no way someone could look at Luna Johnson and not see what I saw. There was no perfect word to describe the woman sitting in my desk chair right now, spinning in circles. Her dark auburn hair moved with each turn. One glass of Don Julio 1942, and she'd loosened up tremendously. Her aura was as calming as staring into her dark brown eyes. "How old are you?" she asked, coming to a complete stop. She pushed one of her thick locks out of her heart-shaped face and stared at me. "I feel as if I know you already, but I don't." "I turned 25 a week ago." "Exactly 1 week ago?" she asked, and I nodded to confirm. Luna stood abruptly and turned to face the floor-to-ceiling windows. The one thing my father wouldn't budge on was giving me the regular office. At his insistence, I had a corner office on the floor below his. "It has to be a sign," she mumbled. I knew she wasn't speaking to me, but I still found myself asking, "What has to be a sign?" Her shoulders lifted and dropped a few times before she gave me her attention again. You all right?" You and my grandmother have the same birthday." She wrapped her arms around herself. "She passed away 2 years ago." "I'm sorry." I took a step forward. "She meant a lot to you." "She was my everything." Luna's eyes filled with tears, and I felt her emotions tap dancing on my heart. What was it about this woman that made me want to protect her from her own pain? Ugh, I'm sorry. We're supposed to be celebrating your big day, and here I am ruining it with my emotions. She chuckled and wiped her eyes. I haven't given you the best impression of myself today. Jesus, we don't even know each other. What is wrong with me? I smiled, and she narrowed her almond-shaped eyes at me. Are you always a little clumsy in those stilts you call shoes? She looked down at the black heels she was wearing the hell out of. Well, yeah. And do you get emotional every time something or someone reminds you of your grandmother? For the most part, yes. Her honesty was a breath of fresh air. Then you've made a great first, second, and third impression. She was simply herself, and I was a man who enjoyed a woman who was comfortable in her skin, even in the face of a stranger. What real man wouldn't find that attractive? In that case, her shoulders relaxed, I'll be 25 in November. We have a few reasons to keep in touch after you leave me today, I replied, taking her change of demeanor as my opportunity to get closer to her. I'd felt the pull to breathe in her scent again since she left me this morning. I needed to get my fix before she came to her senses and got out of Dodge. Oh, yeah? I nodded while enjoying the curiosity in her sweet voice. Luna had effortlessly put me in a celebratory mood. If she hadn't asked, I wouldn't have celebrated today's win at all. I was proud of how far I'd come from working in the mailroom at 16. My father never understood why I wanted to work my way up in this company like every other man and woman, but it was something I had to do. I wanted my colleagues to see that I was dedicated to the company just as much as they were. When I ultimately took over for my old man, I needed them to know they were in good hands. What better way than to go through the trenches with them? What are you... Derek, I have... Oh, sorry, Eric blurted, cutting me off after pushing into my office without knocking. If it wasn't something I was used to from my assistant and cousin, I would have been upset at the intrusion. Eric eyed my closeness to Luna, but I didn't make any effort to move. I couldn't do it. What is it that you have for me? I inquired. The contract copies from today's meeting. I held my hand out, and he inched toward us, never taking his eyes off Luna. While he took her in, Luna had her fingers wrapped around my bicep. I've seen you before. I work across the street, she said. Well, sometimes. Now, Eric shook his head. You guest starred on an episode of Project Runway last season, didn't you? Oh, Luna's soft voice squeaked. Oh my God, it is you. I turned to look at her, and I was positive if she was a few shades lighter, her skin would be bright red. So there's more to you than what meets the eye, huh, Luna? Eric, if you ask her for an autograph, I promise I'll fire you, I warned. But... Get out and take the rest of the day off. After a few seconds, the soft click of my office door shutting sounded. And you... I lifted her head with my index finger. Can I have the rest of your day? You weren't really going to fire him, were you? I laughed and shook my head. I couldn't fire Eric Cole even if I wanted to. He's my cousin and has a stake in the company. She wrapped her hand around my wrist and looked up into my eyes. Then yes, you can have the rest of my day. Say no more. I took her free hand into mine and led us toward the door. I have the perfect place, but I need to get out of this suit and you need to change shoes for where we're going. I can meet you back here in an hour, she suggested after we stepped on Fifth Avenue. Her eyes took in our surroundings and then she brought them back to me. Actually, I have a more comfortable pair of shoes in my office. Would it be alarming if I asked to accompany you to your place while you change? She asked, sounding as if she was asking herself that question instead. How does it make you feel? I asked, slipping my hand into hers and closing the small distance between us. If you're uncomfortable, then we can meet back here. But know you're safe with me. She took a deep breath. I don't know what I'm feeling, but I'm going to follow my heart and accompany you. I nodded and kissed the back of her hand. My mother and father raised me to treat women with the utmost respect. All you have to do is say you want to leave and I'll take you home, no questions asked. Thank you. Don't thank me just yet. Go grab your shoes and I'll get my car. I watched her thick frame as she crossed the street to get to Macy's, entranced by every sway and step. Luna was sexy without even trying. Shaking my head, I entered the Cole Investments building and took the elevator to the parking garage. I didn't drive my cocaine-white Porsche often because I liked riding the train to work. Today I had the urge to pull it out. As I started the ignition and backed out, all I thought about was the intriguing woman who had run directly into my arms no more than 7 hours ago. I had this unwavering feeling that she would be a part of my life for years to come. I've never seen anything so beautiful before, Luna murmured as she walked around my 3-bedroom Brooklyn apartment. It's so modern, and the decor. She spun around to face me. I'd changed and been watching her for the last 10 minutes explore my living room. Did your sister help you with this place? She insisted. She's a genius, and I need to meet her. Sounds like you plan on being a staple in my life. Her eyes widened, and I smiled. Don't try taking it back either. You're different. You know that? Luna's eyes landed on the book sitting on my coffee table. She picked up the novel titled Love on Fifth Avenue and stared at the cover. Are you reading this? Which question should I answer first? She held up the book, and I shook my head. My sister left it here and has been hounding me for 3 days about getting it back. Lily Francine. I've heard of this author. This was her debut novel, and it had record-breaking sales. It was a New York Times bestseller. I may have to buy it myself. The storyline sounds intriguing. She set the book back in its rightful place and gave me her attention. Now you can answer my other question. I'll take your word for it, I said. There wasn't much more I could say to her, believing that I was different. Maybe she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Ready to go? Let's. By the time I got Luna outside of my luxury high-rise building, she was bouncing on her toes in anticipation of what was next. There was something about the way she trusted me without knowing me. There wasn't a sliver of fear emanating from her, and it was a turn-on. I would do everything in my power not to break the trust she had so easily given me. I would be a fool not to. "This way," I said, pulling on her hand. "We're walking?" I nodded. "Where to?" "Brooklyn Bridge." "I never took you as a man who walked places." I smirked and glanced her way. "And that beautiful truck you drive? I mean, wow." I tossed my head back and let out a deep chuckle. She had no idea how many times I'd heard those exact words. It was my first real purchase after my apartment. I love that truck, but honestly, I like the train or walking better. Makes me feel like I belong to this city. "You were born and raised here, right?" "Yeah, on the Upper East Side. My grandfather and his brother started coal investments in their unfinished basements in Harlem. Once it took off, the Coles never lived in poverty again. But I don't know." I paused and looked over at Luna again, finding her soulful eyes watching me. "You don't feel connected to the successful part of your life? The privileged side?" It was as if she'd read my mind. I couldn't speak, so I nodded. There wasn't a woman in New York that I'd had the pleasure of being involved with who could say they figured that out about me. I was grateful for the life I'd been afforded, but I felt as if I had to work harder to prove I earned my place. My father wanted me to embrace what my grandfather and great-uncle had sacrificed for our family, but it was hard to see past what I wanted for myself, how I wanted to see myself. As we entered the walkway of the Brooklyn Bridge, Luna took my hand and laced our fingers together. The gesture was simple, but it still went straight to my heart. What the fuck was this woman doing to me? "You shouldn't feel like you have to work harder because of how people may perceive you." She squeezed my hand. "We are given the lives meant for us. God placed you where you needed to be. He gave you provision and purpose. Where you are is where you're meant to be, Derek." "You got that from a few hours of knowing me?" "Yeah, I did." "How did you grow up?" She smiled and shook her head. "I guess you could say my life was the opposite of yours, money-wise. My grandmother and grandfather raised my two brothers and me after our parents were killed in a car accident. We might not have had everything we wanted, but we had what we needed, and I was grateful for that." "You were rich in love." "Yeah, I guess we were. That's a great way to put it." "Where are your brothers now?" "Tevin is a doctor in Delaware, and Tellen owns a real estate company in Philly." "And you guys are originally from Arkansas?" She nodded and chuckled. "We're as country as they come, but still ended up settling on the East Coast. My grandmother said we would. She always went on and on about how we had big eyes and even larger dreams, but she also encouraged us to go for it." "Speaking of larger dreams, Project Runway?" "Oh, God," she whined. "I'm so embarrassed. It was a Macy's-inspired episode, and I got picked by the company to be a part of it. I can't believe your cousin even recognized me. Dude remembers everything, especially your face, so I ain't even surprised. But what I am surprised to find out is that my future wife has been on television. For all of half an hour, she scoffed, and I laughed. Oh, that's the only part you heard? Nope, but that's the only part I'm addressing. I smiled. She was also a firecracker, and I was fucking with that too. What is it that you do, Luna? I'm a fashion buyer. I work closely with designers to keep Macy's stocked with the baddest threads. She grinned and then laughed. Threads. I went too far with that one. Her comfort with me was shining through at this moment, and it was a beautiful sight to see. How we had gotten here was a question that kept replaying in my mind over and over. I was determined to have my answer by the end of the night. We continued across the bridge in silence until we exited on the Manhattan side into City Hill Park. I had a specific destination in mind, and without completely knowing everything about Luna, I knew she would appreciate what I planned to show her. Chapter 3. Luna. Derek had my complete attention. His whole demeanor and aura had switched up when he changed clothes. The dark jeans, white tee, and white and gold Nike Air Max had summoned a man with immense swag. It also gave me a clear view of the bow-legged walk I hadn't noticed before. My body was on fire, and he knew it. The glances he kept throwing my way said he could read me like a book, and I wanted him to. It was crazy. I wanted this man to explore my pages until he reached the end. Until we reached the end. Tell me something, Luna. He stopped walking and turned to face me. Do you believe in fate? I do, I said, looking up into his intense gaze. You don't find love. It finds you. It's got a little to do with destiny, fate, and what's written in the stars, Lulu. I hadn't believed my grandmother's words until the very moment I ran right into Derek and looked into his eyes. I'd known right then that the stars had aligned in both of our favor. Derek nodded and glanced at Pier 25, the boardwalk on the Hudson River ahead of us. I brought you here because this is where I clear my mind. It's my sacred place, but I feel this urge to share it with you. His eyes never left mine as he spoke. Derek was the type of man who said what he meant and meant what he said. It was the way he moved and spoke that told me everything I needed to know about him. This day, this man. It was a lot to take in, but I wanted to keep experiencing it. I needed to. This may sound crazy, but for as long as I've lived in New York, I've never explored the city like most people do. Feeling bold, I stood on my tiptoes and kissed the corner of his mouth. Thank you for bringing me to the place you cherish most here in the city. I think it's the sweetest thing anyone has ever done for me. If that's the case, then allow me to show you more, even if it's only for today. Yeah, if only for today, I whispered, accepting his hand again. We walked the pier hand in hand, like a couple that had been together for years. It felt natural and real. My heart ached for this to be more than just a one-day thing. I wanted to see this man again and again, to learn every inch of his mind, body, and soul. The need to do so was intense. Sometimes I come out here and think about leaving my life here behind, starting over somewhere new. Why is that? Do you have a good relationship with your parents? My parents are dope, but something is missing. I finished for him. He didn't respond right away. Instead, Derek pulled me toward a bench that faced the water. We were far enough away from the crowd of people on the pier today to have some peace and talk freely. After we settled next to each other, he placed an arm over my shoulder and asked, "Would it be crazy if I said something was missing?" His emphasis on the word had told me all I needed to know. He was feeling just as I was. I shook my head. Want to hear something crazy? Let me hear it, beautiful. I don't think anything can be as crazy as the day we've shared. I smiled because he had a damn good point. Today had certainly been one for the books. For the last week, I've been having some restless nights. I have these beautiful floor-to-ceiling windows in my living room, kind of like the ones you have in your office. Every night, I would just stare out into the darkness, trying to understand what was happening to me. I thought I was losing my mind. But now you think it's something else? I turned my gaze away from the water and focused on him. The stars were aligning. My body knew what was happening, but my mind hadn't caught up yet. At least not until I paused and looked away. It took me a moment to get my thoughts together. I knew what I wanted to say, but the fear I hadn't felt all day began to set in. Derek sat patiently beside me, rubbing circles on my left arm, and it gave me the courage to say what I felt. "Until I met you," I whispered, turning and cupping his cheek. He stared down at me with a challenging glint in his eyes, willing me to make the first move. So I did. Closing the space between our lips, I kissed him. The fireworks were instant, putting on a show behind my eyelids as I savored the taste of his juicy lips. My God, everything about this man was intoxicating. "I knew kissing you would fuck me up in the head," he mumbled against my lips. "I don't know what it is about you, Luna Johnson, but I want to know. I need to know." I pressed my forehead into his and sighed. "The feeling is mutual, Derek Cole. When my family gets wind of this, I won't even let my mind go that far." I laughed softly, thinking of my brothers. Leaning back, I kissed Derek again, then laid my head on his shoulder. Before I could settle in, I sat up again and smiled wide. "What does that look mean?" he asked warily. "I want to show you something." I stood and held my hand out to him. "What do you say, handsome? Can I have another hour or two of your time?" "Take all the time you need from me, sweetheart." He stood and took my hand. "Lead the way." I unlocked my apartment door and pushed my way inside with Derek on my heels. Bringing him to my place wasn't something I'd planned for during our impromptu day together, but I couldn't resist after the things he'd shown and shared with me. Welcome to my humble abode. Luna, it looks like you're living the good life, he said, sounding impressed. I smiled, kicked off my shoes, and turned to find him standing in the middle of my living room. This is the payoff for my hard work. It's a beautiful payoff, he said, picking up a photo of my brothers and me. They're twins. We're triplets, I clarified with a chuckle. Tellen is the oldest by 2 minutes, and then Tevin came 2 minutes after I did. They both treat me as if I'm the youngest, but it doesn't bother me much. I shrugged. I was spoiled by my brothers. Derek glanced up at me and then down at the photo again. I see it now. I laughed and walked toward him, slipping the picture from his hands once I was close. Are they protective of you? He asked. Are you afraid they might try and run you away? Do I look like the type of man who scares easily? He raised an eyebrow, and I smiled. Touché. I turned from him, but didn't get very far. Derek pulled me back into his warm embrace. My body melted into him while we stared into each other's eyes. You're beautiful, he murmured, cupping my chin softly. And you're very handsome. Don't give me a big head, Lulu. My eyes widened at his use of my nickname. What the hell? You just called me Lulu, I whispered, shaking my head. You don't like it? Because I silenced him with a quick, soft kiss. The urge to fill his lips more often after the first kiss had finally set in. I had a feeling it would soon become my obsession. No one calls me that but my brothers and my grandmother when she was alive. I shook my head and reached for his hand. I want to show you something. I led us to one of my spare bedrooms and pushed the door open. After flipping on the light, I glanced at Derek, who scanned the room with razor-sharp focus. My fashion room, to be exact. I was a fashion buyer by day and an aspiring designer by night. In the middle of the room stood 4 fabric mannequin torsos. All 4 were covered in my newest collection. I hadn't let anyone see it yet, and showing Derek seemed like a good idea. Yes, we'd hung out today like old friends, but the truth of the matter remained. We didn't know each other. If anyone could give their best critiques, it was someone who had no real attachment to me. But why did the idea of Derek not having an attachment to me sting a little? Shaking my head, I stepped forward and said, I love my job, but this is my passion. His silence was slightly alarming. He moved from piece to piece, touching the fabric and eyeing the stitching. I felt as if I were in a class at FIT in this intense moment. This is fucking dope, he cut in, glancing at me. Tell me again why you aren't placing your work into stores? You don't have to. His frown stopped me from finishing my statement. I'm glad you decided to keep that to yourself. I know I'm a stranger to you, but I'm no liar. Everything I've said and done with you today was real. Everything I want to say to you will be real. All right? All right, I replied, nodding. The only thing I could do was nod and agree with him. He had convinced me, and until proven otherwise, I would take his word for it. "What's your plans for these?" I shrugged and stared at my designs. I've thought about shopping it around, but I know from experience how big box companies get over on designers. I try my best to give clients good deals, but some buyers are ruthless. "We're in a day and age where you can do this on your own, Luna." He eyed me curiously. It felt as if he saw into my soul, and I had no idea what to do with that information. "Tell me what's really up, because what I'm looking at here deserves to be sold. Whether online or in someone's store, it's meant to be seen." I sighed and said, "I'm in my head, I guess." I was terrified to put myself out there. Comfortable in the role I had at Macy's, I was simply holding myself back because deep down, behind all my fear, I knew I was a damn good designer. I knew I had the talent and the drive to market myself into the hearts of my fashion lovers. I had it, but fear was real, and after years of finding excuses, I let my fear settle deep into my heart. "Let me invest in you." I snapped my head in his direction and gaped at him. "I could not let you." "I'm not talking about money, Lou." He stepped closer and gripped my chin with a little more force than before. My heart raced, and my thong was soaked in my essence. On top of that, he'd just shortened my childhood nickname, and I liked it. What was a woman supposed to do with that? "Let me invest in you. Not money, but courage and faith. Let me pour that into you, so the next time you step into this room, fear won't be anywhere in sight. Can I do that for you?" "Is that... I... I..." I paused and caught my breath. When I felt like I could answer him without being a stuttering mess, I asked, "How can you want to do that when you hardly know me? Today could be our last day seeing each other." He laughed and kissed my forehead. "If you think I'm letting you get away from me, then you have another thing coming. You've already implanted yourself in my spirit. I need to know if this connection between us needs to be expanded upon." His phone chimed for what felt like the first time today. In an instant, I thought of my device that was stuffed into the bottom of my purse. "Shit," he cursed and looked at me. "I forgot about a prior engagement that starts soon." My heart dropped, and then he said, "Be my date?" "What? No way, I couldn't impose." "It would only be imposing if I hadn't asked. We'll go for no more than an hour and then leave. What do you say, Lou? Can I have another hour of your time?" "Yes," I answered without pause. He glanced at the mannequins and pointed to the one draped in a gray casual fall dress and nodded. "Wear that one." He leaned in close and kissed my nose, then my lips. "Phase 1 of knocking that fear out of you. Wear the product." He turned and walked out of the room without another word. "How long do I have to change?" I yelled behind him. "Take all the time you need. We'll get there when we get there." It wasn't until I had freshened up, dressed, and was being whisked out of my apartment that it hit me. I had no idea where I was going. What the hell had I just agreed to? Chapter 4. Derek. Hey, Derek, where are we going? Luna asked after we slid into the back of the car I'd ordered. West Village. I cut my eye at her, and she was staring out the window looking more beautiful than she had at the beginning of this day. I was starting to feel bad because I had purposely left out where we were going when I invited her. There was no doubt in my mind that if she'd known the truth, she wouldn't have agreed to accompany me. My heart didn't want to part with her just yet. Not yet. The ride from her downtown Manhattan apartment to my parents' townhome in West Village didn't take long. I turned to Luna as we idled in front of the building. I have a confession to make. If you want to leave, I'll have Jay drive you back home. Luna eyed me warily, and I hated that look on her. I'm listening. This, I pointed out the window, is my parents' place. Every Friday we have a family dinner, and that's what's happening in there tonight. Derek, you should have told me that. She didn't sound angry, but I couldn't be too sure about what she was feeling inside. Luna had a great poker face and her body stayed calm and lax. Sighing, I sat back in my seat and said, I know. The thought of leaving you didn't sit right with me, but I knew I couldn't miss tonight either. I don't like celebrating my accomplishments, but my mother would have been disappointed if she didn't get to bask in my win with me. If it were any other night, I would have skipped out and made it up to her later, but I couldn't do that on this specific night. I understand if you want to leave, but before you go, can I have your number? I want to be able to hear your voice when I leave here, and I want to see you again as soon as possible. It didn't matter if she didn't stay. Luna was mine. She knew it, and so did I. The minute I wrapped my arms around her this morning, our story began to write itself. We had many more pages to fill. Don't ever trick me like that again, she said, opening the door and sliding out. I bit my lip and chuckled. Feisty. Every hour I spent with this woman, I learned something new. Let's go, handsome. We're here now, and I'm starving. I hope your mother can cook. I slid out of the car and took her hand. If there's one thing Deanna Cole can do, it's throw down in the kitchen. I started counting to 5 in my head as we neared the door. When I made it to 4, the front door swung open and my sister Demetria poked her head out. Mom has been pouting, so I'm glad you're here. I can't... Oh, hello. Hi, Luna murmured in response. You brought a date? Demetria had now stepped completely out of the house, and I frowned. She's beautiful. Oh my goodness, where'd you get that dress? Dee, chill, I said. You're going to scare her away. Sorry. Her apology was directed at Luna. It's all right. I don't scare easily. I glanced at Luna and smiled down at her. It was good to know she wouldn't run scared because as soon as we crossed the threshold, she would be in a different world. My family was prim and proper outside of those 4 walls, but inside, we were a mess. Mom is going to love this. My sister rushed into the house and I shook my head. Are you ready? We only have a few seconds before the whole house knows I brought you here. Luna looked me dead in my eyes and said, I think I may have been born ready for this. Fate. Nodding, I led us into my parents' home, and there in the entryway was my favorite lady. "If it isn't my favorite son," my mother spoke, her southern accent shining through more than usual. She placed her light brown eyes on Luna and smiled. "And who is this beauty?" "I'm your only son, Ma." She rolled her eyes and moved closer to us. "This is Luna." I looked from the woman who raised me to the woman I knew would be my wife one day and continued. "Luna, this is my mother, Deanna." "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Cole." My mother snorted and waved her hand in the air. "Please call me Deanna. Mrs. Cole makes me sound old. And I mean, look at me." I sighed, and Luna giggled. At least she found my mother's antics funny. "Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Deanna. And your home is beautiful." "Thank you, my dear." My mother wasted no time pulling our hands apart and stealing her from me. "Go find your father. I'll take care of Luna." I watched them retreat, and before they were out of view, I heard my mother ask, "Where are you from? And more importantly, where did you get this lovely dress from?" Luna's eyes caught mine, and I nodded reassuringly. She had nothing to fear here. This was home. "Holy shit," Demetria cursed, grabbing my arm. "You only met her today?" I'd run the story down to everyone at dinner about how Luna and I met. Eric had opened his mouth to announce that he'd met her today, and I was attacked with more questions than I could answer. Lying about how long she'd been in my life wasn't an option, so I stuck with the truth. "When did you start cursing so much?" I asked, deflecting. Not you too. Dad, Uncle Drew, and Eric asked the same thing. Why are all the men in this family so worried about my potty mouth? I'm just expressing myself." I chuckled and wrapped my arm around her shoulder. Demetria turned 18 a few weeks ago and was enjoying her newfound adulthood too much. "You're our baby." "I'm grown," she sassed. "All right, my grown baby." "You suck, you know that?" I've heard it a time or two. As we walked toward the kitchen, silence filled the space between us. But it wasn't long before Demetria spoke again. I knew my baby sister like the back of my hand. She only needed a few quiet seconds to get her thoughts together. "She seems nice. Mom likes her, and Eric has asked her about Project Runway, which is so cool, by the way, like 6 times, so it's safe to say he likes her too." "Yeah, but what about you, Dee? What do you think of her?" My sister felt like my child in a sense. When my mother brought her home from the hospital, I stuck around and helped her as much as she would allow. The older she got, the more attached we became. Even though Demetria was 8 years younger than me, we were best friends. Her opinion of the woman I was falling for meant a lot to me. "She looks at you like you're her world. But how is that possible if you only just met?" "Life has a way of giving you exactly what you need when you need it. Fate is real. Soulmates are real." "And you think she's yours?" I nodded. "Yeah, so do I. She's definitely who you're meant to be with, and I'm happy for you. Don't fuck it up. Demetria Cole, watch your mouth in my house," she yelled from the other room. "Sorry, Ma." I hadn't realized we made it to the kitchen until I heard my mother's voice and looked up. I found Luna immediately, and her eyes were already on mine. I couldn't get a read on her, so I held my hand out and she slowly made her way to me. "Take a walk with me," I said, enclosing my hands around hers and leading us toward the back of the house. "This place is breathtaking. You're breathtaking." I lightly pushed her into a wall, trapping her in. "Derek, are you doing okay here? I know they can be a lot to handle. We can leave if—" "Slow down, babe," she muttered, looking up at me while my eyes fell to the rise and fall of her chest. She was turned on by closeness, so I moved in closer. "I'm doing all right here. Your family is great and welcoming." "My uncle asked if you were from Kansas and knew Dorothy." She chuckled and wrapped her arms around my neck. My Uncle Drew was a pain in the ass sometimes. He'd been teasing my mother about her southern accent for years. She was born and bred in Alabama before moving to New York after college. She met my father a month later, and the rest was history. He did, but it was pretty funny. I leaned my forehead into hers. Having her this close was exhilarating. I needed more. "I can handle myself, Derek, and if I ever feel uncomfortable, I promise to tell you." "Stay with me tonight," I blurted before I could stop myself. "Nothing has to happen. I just want you near me. I want to hold you." When you say things like that, it goes straight to my heart. I want everything I say to go to your heart. It's my connection to you, the person. I should tell you something before things go too far between us. Whatever it is, won't matter. You say that now, but I'm celibate. It's by choice. I want to give myself to my husband. So you're a virgin? Yes. I'm a 24-year-old virgin, and it means something to me. It's special and sacred, and I leaned in and kissed her lips softly. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. Your spirit is beautiful. And all I want is a chance to show you I'm worthy of you. So if celibacy until marriage is your deal breaker, then it's mine too. So don't be trying to take advantage of me in my sleep and shit. Her eyes widened, and then she burst into laughter. It was the sweetest sound. It's hard to say no to you. I don't know you, but I know you, if that makes sense. You feel safe to me. You feel right. This feels right. So yes, Derek Cole, I will give you a chance to show me you're worthy of me. And I will also allow you to hold me tonight. Luna had no idea how her words had sparked a fire of determination inside of me. From this day forward, it was her and I, and no one else. The end.